Welcome to the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature top founders and entrepreneurs and share their inspiring stories. Now, let's get started with the show.
Matthew Connor here, host of the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature successful business leaders, authors, top law firms, green energy companies, and more. Today, we are kicking off our IT Manager series with the IT Manager for OTJ Architects, David Johnson. David, welcome to the show.
It's nice to be here. How you doing this morning?
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us. And before we get too far in, a quick word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by CyberLynx.com. That's CyberLynx.com. Do you know if a hacker's in your system? Most people and most companies don't until it's too late and the hacker's already done damage. A hacker's job is to bypass your security, so companies need a way of knowing when someone has gotten past their security. That's where CyberLynx intrusion detection comes in. With our 24/7 Security Operations Center, we use a combination of AI and cybersecurity technicians to see when a hacker successfully bypassed your security. So if a bad guy gets past your security, we'll know right away and be able to kick them out. Find out more at cyberlynx.com. That's cyberlynx.com. And now back to our show. David, very excited to have you on today. For those who aren't familiar, can you tell us about OTJ and your role there as the IT manager?
Yeah, so OTJ is an architect firm that's been around for quite some time, about 25 years. We've grown in the recent years. We are all throughout the US. Our home base is in DC. We have offices in New York, Boston, Miami, San Francisco, San Diego, Chicago, and we're still growing. So if you are, and we've done a lot of work for big names, and if you are a startup and you're looking to get your vision and get artists to make the space fill out your vision, OTJ Architects is the firm for you. If you are looking, we won a lot of awards. They're very good. I can barely draw a stick figure, which is why they have me in the IT closet and not an architect.
Me too. I'm in the same boat. And I saw their website and I'm like, damn, those are some really cool spaces. I mean, and I'm right. And I'm struck same as you. I'm like, I can't draw a stick figure without it coming to life, hopping off the page and beating me to death for drawing it so morbidly bad. So yeah, I feel you. So now you've got a ton of locations really for for an architecture firm, especially. So, and as the IT manager, do you find that challenging? I mean, that having all of those locations and people all over the country?
I wouldn't say challenging, with post-COVID and remote work being a thing and remote work becoming more of a thing. I think it was a challenge that a lot of companies had, and having to deal with people who aren't in the office, aren't in front of you. I can't walk to their desk to resolve their issue. I have to figure out how to get it. It's definitely been a thing that was on the mindset. I was actually brought into OTJ only about a year ago. At the time, they were transitioning because they had tremendous growth. They went from about 70 people to 230. So they really, really grew. And they wanted to get away from MSPs and they wanted an in-house IT. Because of the growth, they wanted it to be more personal. They wanted it to live by the culture of the company. When you outsource, you kind of don't get those things.
Right.
And they wanted to be a little bit more timely. Like the ISP they had, their response rate was like 72 hours, which is crazy.
Oh,
So I was brought in on that onset to help with the build out of Azure and to do their cloud infrastructure. And so it was fun. Like initially, I was supposed to just be like the behind the scenes, like I do all the work that the end users don't think about or worry about, but it's necessary for the job to function. And we had our IT director leave, and with him leaving, I stepped in to fill those shoes, which is how I became the IT manager. So my focus became a lot more broad and specific to the infrastructure.
nice. Well, congratulations on that. Now you've had a pretty interesting, I'd say, career path, and I really like that because I think a lot of people in IT and even in business, they tend to have these unique paths. You think it's kind of like mailroom to CEO kind of path, and it seldom is. So can you take us through yours? I mean, how did you get into to IT?
Yeah.
how'd that start for you?
I'll tell a quick story to start that off. So initially, I wanted to be a psychologist. So I was in school for psychology. I had an early life crisis and didn't want to do that anymore, probably going into my sophomore year. I went home to cook with my grandma. I realized I love cooking. I said, you know what? Screw this. I'm going to be a chef. And so I dropped out and went to culinary school my parents were cool about it. They weren't too upset. But
That's
so,
nice.
like in retrospect, looking back, they were very cool. And that was it. And in culinary school, I was committed. I just found a decent job. Was putting in 16-hour days. But I met this wonderful woman, and I literally had got to the decision: it's either going to be the career or the girl. And I chose the girl, as a 20-year-old probably would. Now, granted, worked out for me. We'll be happily married 11 years this year on July 5th. So great decision.
Congratulations.
But I don't know if I would encourage everybody to make that decision. So then at the time, I just had to get a gig because I knew I couldn't pursue that career because it would mess up our relationship. She worked at Apple at the time, so I got a job at Apple, and thus started this crazy IT career that put me here. So even I fell into IT. It wasn't something I wanted or I pursued. I didn't know anything about technology. I'm a country bumpkin, like so. It was even how I got into IT is very strange and odd. Um, didn't have a degree, as I said. I dropped out of school technically twice. Um, and then I just worked my way up. Like I stayed at Apple for about 5 years. I left Apple to go work for Amazon. They were building a new department and they wanted someone to write the SOPs for that. So I got to do that, which was an amazing opportunity. After that, I went into the contract side of things. I worked at the Senate. I was at the Senate for a few years. After leaving the Senate, went to a law firm, and then I ended up at OTJ. So I kept falling up, and there wasn't real. I know a lot of times people tell you got to have vision and focus and know where you wanted to go, and for me, it just wasn't that. And granted, it worked out, but yeah, so very random path that got me here.
Well, you know what? First of all, I think the one thing that I really love about the tech industry is that we've had so many very successful people who didn't have that degree in that field, and I think it opened the door and opened people's minds to the fact that you don't need a formal education in this. If you apply yourself and you learn, I mean, for most jobs, we're not talking about brain surgery here. We're talking about IT, and not to say that IT isn't complex. Of course, technology is very complex, but the difference is you do need a lot of formal training, to be a good surgeon. You don't need that formal training. That stuff you can get on the job. You can learn yourself. I wouldn't trust a surgeon who taught himself via YouTube and Googling shit. I would not feel very comfortable under that scalpel because it would probably be a buck knife and I'd probably be dead. But when it comes to IT, for sure, there are a ton of people who, who the traditional education wasn't right for them, but in the tech, but they're bright, they're focused, they enjoy it. And that's really all you need. I mean, let's face it. I think it's interesting that English is the most, interesting enough, and true story, English is the most difficult language in the world to learn, which most, Americans are like, that's crazy. I mean, I've been speaking it my whole life. It's pretty straightforward. Oh yeah. Well, how do you explain go and then went? How do you get from go to went? That's crazy. It should be
Yeah,
goed, right? Like that's the past for
yeah,
go at goed. But we went with went, and that makes no sense. And so it's a very difficult language with verb conjugation, all this stuff. And I say this because, people who can speak English, you can learn. If you can speak English, you can learn other things as well. As a general rule, I'm talking, obviously, if you've had some head trauma and now you have a learning, problem, like me, then you're going to have problems. But for the rest of the population, you're doing okay, right?
yeah.
So technology is one of those things where if you're interested in it, you can really, fly. And we find a lot of people, like you who come into it by happenstance and just do this and find that, hey, this is really cool. This is great. It makes sense. And then one of the things I love is that I think there are a lot of people in tech who are this kind of the stereotypical, geek who maybe they don't have those soft skills, and that's challenging. And you had an interesting start with Apple. And I'd love to kind of explore that, because I think Apple takes the same approach. I've always said to our people that we are therapists first and technicians second. And so with everything that we do, I don't care if it's on the cybersecurity side, if it's on the IT side, first and foremost, you gotta be good with the person, calm them down because they're having an emergency, even if it's like my Outlook won't open, or there's a hacker in our system, whatever it might be. You got to be able to take care of the person, and then also the problem. And so I love your Apple start. Can you kind of walk us through what that was like, how they focused on those soft skills, and what that did for you?
Yeah, it was a very unique opportunity because, like I said, I wasn't the typical geek. I wasn't good with technology. I didn't understand it. But being a country boy, like I could talk, like I could sit next to you, make you laugh, make you smile.
Right.
I had a little bit of Southern charm to me, right? And that's what gravitated Apple towards me and helped me get the job at Apple, was that because they wanted people who already had the ability to communicate, which at the time, I think when I started working for Apple, I was like 19, 20. I thought that was the oddest thing. I was like, this is a tech company. What are they hiring me for if I don't know their tech specifically?
Yeah.
But one of the things that did is it taught me to be a continual learner. Like one thing that Apple taught me, which was really well, is how to learn and how to learn fast. Like Apple always had product launches, and literally there would be times where like I would come in from like an hour before my shift. I would have to learn every single thing about a new product, every single thing about an OS that just released. Because I'm about to have 100 customers come ask me about it. And literally, I just learned this 30 minutes ago and I'm
Yeah.
talking like an expert. Like
Yeah.
so I learned how to absorb information very fast and how to articulate it in a way. Um, because you learn that like if you're speaking to a novice, and I don't think that's a rude term,
Mm.
everything you say sounds like an expert. So it's more so about speaking with confidence and just learning maybe two or three facts than knowing the whole SOP for the product. So
Right.
it was very interesting that they taught me how to learn, but also too they one of the core things that stuck with me is exactly what you said. What Apple taught me is that we're not here to fix products. We're here to repair relationships. Like
Ooh.
exact terminology when I started. And it still sticks with me to this day. And that's one of the like my secret weapon in like interviewing and being able to impress the C-suite is empathy and soft skills. Because like when you lead with that, like, all right, like this is how we're gonna repair the relationship. Because
Yeah.
if you're in IT, the client is always the staff. While you're on the same team, your client is the staff. So like when they hear that, oh, this person wants to repair the relationship, they care about the individual, they care about the vision. Like those are things that sell to C-suite because that's what C-suite sells to the customer.
That's
So
right.
like you gotta understand who your customer is. And like all those are skills that Apple taught me. But that was a big kicker. Like we're not here to repair products, we're here to repair relationships. And
Love
carried
that.
that with me this long.
Yeah, I love that. That is such a good line. We're gonna, and we're not borrowing it. We're gonna straight up steal that one. I'm gonna steal it and use that internally because I think that's really great. Like, that's beautiful. That is, wow. Apple. No wonder they're doing so great.
The best training in the world. Like honestly, I believe like I have not been in an organization that has trained better than they do. Like just their vision and their thought and knowing how to take a raw talent and make them to a culture fit. Because a
Yeah.
lot of places they hire people that they think will be an initial fit, but with Apple, they know they can hire anyone and they can build it into you. That's a lot of confidence for a company. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what, we take that same approach of just, you got to hire somebody with a certain amount of soft skills. Like I can teach the technical skills. Anybody can learn that. And as you said, like you went in zero technical, like why did they hire me? Because you had those soft skills are a lot harder, and I think they're becoming even more rare today than they were 10, 15, 20 years ago, because people, I think kids are growing up with iPads and iPhones and social media, and a lot of their interactions are not face to face. Not, it's no fault of their own. I think it's just a part of the times that their interactions are virtual, a lot of virtual interactions, and so they don't end up getting like the country bumpkin who isn't in front of a screen their whole life, but they're in front of people, and they learn those soft skills. They learn how to have those conversations and be comfortable and be genuine. And so I think a lot of that is lacking, but I think that also gives a real advantage to those kids coming into the workforce who do have those soft skills, And so I think this is a nice, transition into my next question of, if you were looking back, at yourself, kind of at the beginning, and now having gotten where you are today, what kind of advice? And I know you probably give this to all of your people there all the time, but for those who aren't here, on your staff with you, what advice do you give to the younger you, just coming into IT?
So this is actually a very difficult question because a lot of it depends on what
Yeah,
you're
we don't
looking
hold
for,
punches.
right?
We go at it.
A lot of it depends on what you're looking for, right? Like 32-year-old David has a wife and 2 kids. So my priorities are completely different than like 19-year-old David who doesn't have a care in the world and like very, very little responsibility.
Yeah.
Um, but what I tell some of the guys that work under me, and this may seem as controversial, is like, look, just make your plan to be here for about 2 years and then leave. Like have an exit plan already. And I say that because, like, unfortunately, just in the landscape of the way IT is you kind of got a job hop. And I know a lot of employers do not like hearing that. And it is a very culture shift for the C-suite to hear job hopping. But IT is a unique department within any organization. It does not exist like a marketing department or a BD department. And I think job hopping is essential because one, you're going to get better skills. The the skills I needed at the law firm I was at is completely different than the skills I need for the architect firm. I was at a law firm that specialized in cybersecurity and representing cybersecurity clients. So that's when I got a real, real fast cybersecurity one-on-one course and like,
Yeah.
we cannot have an issue. Whereas where I'm at now, cybersecurity is more lax. Not that we don't address it appropriately, but the need is not as big.
Yeah.
So I think you need a job hop if Actually, let me backtrack. I think
Yeah.
the first thing you need to ask yourself, do you want to be a generalist or a specialist? That is what I would tell a young person coming into IT. Me personally, it has benefited me to be a generalist. Because I'm a generalist, that has made me a very good leader because I can relate to a lot of it. Like,
Yep.
IT is a root. Like a lot of people see it as one vein, but when you actually look under the surface, it branches out everywhere.
Nice.
There are so many different paths you can take, and specialization definitely has its benefit. One, super high pay. You specialize, people will pay whatever you want. But also, if you specialize and that skill set becomes obsolete, you have to creep without a paddle. So it's a risk in that. Whereas a generalist, you can kind of fit in where you need to fit in. And I think generalists make better leaders because I can relate to the networking guys, I can relate to the cybersecurity guys, I can relate to the tier one help desk. So I think that's one thing you need to do because that'll address how you're going to approach your career. I like being a generalist because I found out IT is kind of fun and I like learning, and so I wanted to know everything, which at first I thought was a detriment, but it helped me. Like I know, I don't know a lot, but I know a little bit about everything, which works.
I
Yeah.
love that. So, um, I think that's really great advice for those, and I love that perspective of, from a manager's perspective and a director's perspective, accepting the reality. And I think that's really, I think that's the brilliance of what you've done there with that perspective. Is you're not trying to kind of fight the current and say, no, we want everybody to stay here. People will say, yeah, I'll stay here forever. And then they're going to leave in 2 years, or 3 years or 1 year or whatever it works out, for them when their time is done and they're ready to move to another. The fact that you've embraced reality, I think that is one, the sign of really good leadership, because all too often, people, it was, Steve Jobs had this, I don't know if you've heard about this, his reality distortion, field, where, and it's fine when you're one of the rare few who have enough power and influence to where you can say, despite the fact that this isn't realistic, I'm going to make it a reality. Right.
I'm
And,
not
and
there
you,
just yet.
right. But most of us, mere mortals, without that sort of, power and control over other people, we can't change the forces of the universe and make things, change reality. And so I'd love that you embrace that and you accept that, because for far too many leaders, wanting things to be a certain way, they try to do that reality distortion thing a little bit, and it doesn't go well, right? And so the fact now, how do you communicate that, or have you communicated that to the C-suite? And like, look, this is IT. It's a different beast. And by embracing our 2-year kind of turnover rate, we're gonna get new blood in there, but we're gonna get better at training them up. We're gonna get new fresh blood that bring new perspectives. How did you go about, or have you gone about, bringing this up to the C-suite, and what was their reaction to it?
So that's very interesting. And C-suites tend to be different because one is personalities, and really, especially when you get to manager, director, that type of role, like really at that point it's managing relationships and managing personalities, right? And the first thing I had to do is get them to accept that IT is just different. You cannot manage and you cannot view IT in the same light that you view every other department. And who knows, maybe I'm slightly biased because I like rose up through the ranks from help desk to where I'm at now. So I'm in a very unique position where, like, when I say I understand those guys, I generally do because I was in their shoes. But when I also say I understand, like, the C-suite wants results. At the end of the day, we're a business, and businesses are driven by the results, and we're driven by this is where we want to be. Like, I understand both of those perspectives, and it's finding a marriage in between it. Um, it's almost kind of like parenting, right? Like, me and my wife have to agree on different parenting styles to get, like, where we want for our kids, which is ultimately just to be like happy and accept who they are and kind of thing. So it's very similar. So the company I'm at now has fantastic retention. When they hire architects, like on average, they stay for about 3 years. Really, really good retention numbers. IT is the baby because, like I said, they had an MSP before, and now we're building a in-house IT. So I actually get a lot of leverage in that it is the beginning phases, and we're building an identity, and I get to use the nice C-suite terms, and when I elaborate and explain, it's like, this is where I'm taking them, and you gotta allow me to do these steps so I can take them, right? So I get that leverage. That it's not like an
Nice.
established team, or it's not a team I need to rebuild, but like we're in our infancy. IT in this company has been there for 2 years. And really, we're in phase two of that. Like, we had the successful phase one, which was implementation. We got the staff, we got it in. Now it's let's make sure it fits within the culture, and IT embodies the culture, which that is, a specialty of mine because I learned those skills from Apple.
That's nice.
um, the 2-year retention thing. What I found is when I'm open and I'm honest with my team members, because a lot of the guys that like work for me now, they've been in jobs, and like that's not a conversation you have. And I was like, look, I
Yeah.
understand. All I ask is just give me the notice so I know it's coming. But I think you also, as a leader, you have to plan for failure. And somebody leaving is not a failure. That's just business. People come and go, they got lives. Like, you have to plan for that. And I don't I actually had someone who talked to me and was like, no, no, our plan should 100% be retention, and we need to keep them. And I just simply asked why. And it couldn't justify it to me in that, like, that's normal for IT. I said, I'm lucky if I get a year out these guys. But in knowing that they're going to leave, or me having a mindset they're going to leave, I know what I want to get out of somebody when I hire them. So I can plan out Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. If they meet all of these metrics, they were a good hire. They were worth every single penny. And then when I talk about ROI for my salaries for my staff, like, no, we got a great return on investment for this person because this is what we wanted, but they over met our expectations and we got this. And when things like that happen, then I can give bonuses or raises, and then we actually keep people longer. So in planning for them to leave, I actually keep them longer. And granted, a lot of this is theory because I've only been there for about a year, but based on the conversations and the feedback I've gotten from C-suite and my staff,
100%.
it's trending in the right direction, which is like my
100%.
favorite term as a leader. I want us to trend in the right direction.
100%. I mean, and you've created that's just one aspect of what I can only imagine is a very accepting culture, where you are actually supportive of your employees' career path and what they need as an individual, and you're not trying to impose the company's desires, not superseding their growth as an for their career or as an individual. And I think I think the natural reaction to that is, oh, that's awesome. And so you become, when you get people who are in that position, now it's not even the devil they know. They know they're in a really nice place and they really like it. And so then the question is, do I really want to look? It's that's the
Exactly.
fear of change. Like, I don't know. I take this other job and I could leave this great job I have with David, and it's really nice. I love the team. The culture is great. Okay, I'll get a little more money, but what if it's shit? What if what if I hate it there? Right. So I think you're naturally gonna have more retention there. And so I think kudos on that. I think that's just a brilliant way of going about it. And even though you're a year in, I'd be interested to see, we fast forward a few years, see what those numbers, how they really play out. But you said something really interesting that I'd like to explore about kind of the ROI, because traditionally, I'd say that IT and cybersecurity, they just aren't, they're not revenue generators. They're support. They're defensive. They, much like an insurance policy in a way. So for a lot of IT managers, directors, CIOs, CISOs, they struggle with getting that message across and getting the support they need a lot of time to say, hey, look, and first of all, I think you have to thank that old MSP for their garbage response times, because it gave you
That
your
was an
job,
easy
gave you
fix.
all this opportunity. They're like, oh, anything but them. They're the worst. And I kind of wish we could like name them so we can kind of name and shame. No, I'm just kidding. But but thank God for unanswered prayers type of thing, right? It's like, had they been okay, you might not be here today. And so thankfully for that. But I think that also bleeds into when you go to them and say, hey, look, we need this for cybersecurity. We got to start doing this, because if we building it in-house is cost, it costs a fortune, right? Like, let's just say like SOC, for instance,
Yeah.
together a security operations center, it's like a $750,000 a year thing to have 24/7. That's ridiculous for a small company. You can't do that. So you feel like, hey, look, we need to know when somebody's bypassed our security. We can't watch all the logs. Have you seen how much crap comes in on 250 accounts? It's insane. Just their email alone, those logs are crazy. So we need a way of doing it. So I think, and I'm getting to a question here.
Yeah.
I think that, given what you've said about the moving from the old MSP and the C-suite understanding. So when you're like, hey, I need this support, it, I think interestingly, do you have an easier time, do you think, convincing the C-suite of, hey, look, IT, we need, this position filled. We need this, piece in there. We need this, whatever it might be, insert, product, service, result. Do you find that you're having an easier time, or would you say, no, I have the same struggles that everybody else has, where it's like, we are not generating revenue, so it's hard to say the ROI, because we brought in zero revenue. So there's an investment, but there's no return financially. So long question.
No, but it's a good one. And I would think I'd be lying if I don't give some credit to friend, mentor, and old boss like Harold Petts. So I really came in, like Harold started this process, and I'm taking it over for him. So I want to give him the credit. Like he got to OTJ about a year before me and started it, and then he brought me in because we had worked together before, because he wanted some help, and then he left. So now I'm doing it just me. But so I wanted to give him credit and not take all of it. Um, and I have the same struggles that I think most people do in explaining the C-suite. So I think it's probably better to explain my approach to it, opposed to like if I think I succeed with it. Um, One thing for me has been trying to explain to the C-suite that the value of IT isn't always inherently dollars and cents, and it's risk mitigation. Like, you pay upfront for IT and you pay upfront for a cybersecurity team because you want to avoid all those problems. And I've even gotten this blunt and say, all right, we cannot pay we cannot pay 300,000 in salary, or we can get a $2 million ransomware attack. which one would you prefer?
Yeah.
And you know, it's a little bit blunt, but like at the same token, like I think we get it, right? Like honestly, like cybersecurity keep me up at night, even though like we have it and it's in place, but like it is an uphill battle and everybody's always getting better. And if you don't educate yourself for 6 months, now it's like you never were in the field. Like it,
That's
so
right.
it's such a struggle in terms
Yeah.
just that one area. Um, and the C-suite doesn't get it. It's like, why do you keep wanting to spend money? Like, why do you want this software? Like, why do you want this? Now, granted, like I said, because we are transitioning from MSP to in-house, one thing we've been able to do is audit. We had a lot of useless software. So I actually been able to show that we are slightly profitable because I've been able to throw away junk
Yes.
software and like,
Reduce
nah,
that
we can do
cost.
this. Like I can, yeah, so I've been able to find cost savings. So at least in the initial setup, it's been slightly easier in that sense. Now, granted, how it's going to go 2 years from now, different, so different approach.
Yeah, for sure.
If we're
Yep.
being honest. So
Uh-huh.
it's really, really that. And the one thing I've been trying to beat in is, as a company, what is our risk tolerance? Like, how much are you truly willing to risk? Like, do we not want to pay a good single person what, a $90,000 salary to make sure that nothing ever happens? Or we just not going to pay that person. We're going to have our system admin double team, him do all the infrastructure and him do cybersecurity. And if you're doing two jobs, you can't
Yeah,
do them both perfect. So like,
that's right.
what really is our risk tolerance? And
Yeah.
they have become more and more acceptable than that because I started showing them logs. I started showing like, well, look, our team members are clicking on phishing links and we stopped this, but it could have led to this. And because we had to do this, we couldn't do this. It's time. Time is money. And it's really getting them to understand the fear,
Yeah.
the fear
Yeah.
of cybersecurity. And that helps them be more receptive. And granted, like I said, it's a balance. Like they got metrics. Are we profitable? Can we afford that? Like they can't dump all the money in the IT. So it's been interesting conversations. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because you got to kind of balance the fear mongering, right? Of because
Yeah.
it's really easy, and most cybersecurity people are the most paranoid, and because they understand, they're like, no,
Rightfully
no,
so.
no, lock it all down. They're just so fun to work with. They don't believe in anything being easy or convenient for the end user. They do not care. It is all about, they have been scared into oblivion and they just want it to be safe. And that's good. You got to have it. But now, it's funny because I'm in the position where I was like, well, that does not sell. Like, I get it. It's very, very safe, but
Yeah.
it's hard to sell that to people. And so I think in the C-suite, where as the IT manager, balancing that fear of the $2 million ransom, we come in one day and the funny part is, so you get to stay up at night worried, like, crap, you just don't know. You wake up in the morning, if you go in and you turn on the computers and there's a ransom note, first of all, you're the guy they blame. You're the one whose head's on the chopping block. Why didn't you stop and be like, but you didn't give me money for oh, that's not going to cut it. They don't give a
Nope,
crap. They're like,
I gotta
your
go find a
job
new
was
job.
everything, right? You're just done. And so, yeah, you're sweating every day you come in, you're like, oh, thank God it all turned on today, right? Like, you kidding me? That's crazy. But yet you're not alone, right? And then it is such a hard conversation because first of all, once they sign off on that IT budget, it's like, yep, that's your budget. Stick with it. Okay, cool. Got it. And then unfortunately, the cyber world doesn't just stay the same. And as you said, every 6 months, you might as well not even have been in the cyber industry because it is so changed. And now somehow your crystal ball was supposed to be so good that you saw into the future far enough ahead to be like, hey, you know what? There's going to be this really cool advancement in AI, and it's not here yet, but it's going to be here in a year, and it's going to be this product, and we're going to need that 9 months from now. So I'm going to budget that in. First of all, you'd sound like you're a lunatic.
Yeah.
But if you were right, well, heck, you should be playing the lottery, not working, right? But anyways, so it's this really fun position that they put you in, and I'm curious, are you able to relay that in a way that people get, or is it just the inherent struggle of the job that is the burden you carry as the IT manager and of the firm, That is the cross you bear.
It's I think it comes down to how persuasive you are. And I think this is perhaps something that's not talked about enough in IT because we have to be very analytical and very technical, but like you got to work on those soft skills too. And it may benefit you to take like a public speaking or a persuasive writing course because I'm the way that my organization lays out, my direct report is the CFO. So like all my decisions are money based, and the person I report to, all his decisions are money based. So like we just talk money. So it's I guess it's more natural and it's easier because of who I have to report to. Um, and then also like he understands IT more so than I think a general C-suite person would.
Yeah.
So I joked and said you got to sell the fear. But he gets it. So we can have realistic conversations and not like you need to do all of this with half the budget. And I can say that's just not realistic. And it's more so what options do we have? And that's what he wants. He wants options. He's give me an A, B, and a C, and we can pick one or we can find a middle ground. So I'm lucky that the person I have to report to is reasonable.
Yeah.
Just to sum it up simply.
Well, I think there's such huge benefit into having, reporting directly to the CFO, because on the one hand, once you have one person to convince versus if they put you, let's say they just made you the CIO, and now you have to convince everybody. You got to convince that. Whereas right now, once the CFO is on board, and that's always going to be the tough nut to crack, is do we have the money for it? Does
open up the wallet just this one time?
I know you got the money. I need the money. Give me the money. Right. This is really easy. Right. That is he's like, all we do is talk money. That is the essence of all your conversations with the CFO. But that's really cool in that you just have that one to convince. And then once that's done, it's like that domino, all the others fall. Because if the CFO is like, look, fine, because they also get the financial side of the downside of ransom, of what's this do to us. And it's not even so much the ransom. I mean, it is kind of ransomware is an easy one for people. Thankfully, COVID did a lot of great things for our industry. Honestly, nobody's going to say it. I'm going on record. It has. I'm not condoning ransomware. I'm not condoning what has happened. I'm not for all the people who died because of COVID. But what I do think is great is, I think as an industry and as Americans, we persevere. So these hardships make us better. And I think, COVID has done that in that one, when the bad guys came and they found an opportunity, they're like, oh, people are working from home. And then they found ways of exploiting that. And they came and they really used ransomware heavily. What it did do for the you and me's of the world is it made the ideas of, hey, look, we can work remotely. It made that much more acceptable. We can support remotely. Great. You don't need to send people everywhere. They don't have to come to your desk to fix your problem. And then on top of that, the ransomware, the nice part is it gave a face and a name to the enemy, so that when you're talking to the CFO, when you're talking to the C-suite, this is the enemy. It's hitting other organizations, and it is only a matter of time before it hits us. And what do we do, when it's here? If it hits us tonight, what are we going to do tomorrow? And what's that do to us financially, our reputation? What can we afford? Do we mitigate this just with insurance and be like, yep, just pay it and it's fine? Or is it one of these things where we don't want to give the bad guys money? We want to play the game. We want to play honestly. We want to play fairly. We want to do the right thing and be squared away. Right. And so where do we put our money? Where do we fall on that in that decision? And I think that's really, so I think that's really great. And I love that you just get to talk to the CFO and say, hey, boom, I've got one person to convince, one person to say, I don't like ransomware either.
Yeah. And like that situation, like I said, I'm so lucky, I'm so blessed because like if I need a little bit more cushion, I can just justify it very easy. And it doesn't, and because of the relationship to me and him, I don't have to do the formalness. Like I don't got to put together the PowerPoint presentation, get all the metrics and the numbers. Like I love it. He likes bullet points. I can give him the straight bullet points. What's the dollar amount? And he'll just be honest. Like we can't do this. Can we hold it for 3 months? And and it's a blessed situation to be in because he
That's
gets
really
it. Yeah,
nice.
so it's really good conversation. So I'm lucky in that respect.
That is really nice. Yeah, no, a lot of people are not nearly as lucky. I think, my goal here with kind of the IT manager series is that other IT managers could hear this and be like, hey, you know what? I should be reporting to the CFO. What if, that I think that, and it makes so much sense. And I think a lot of them aren't. They may be reporting to the CEO or the COO. And now that may not be the best, most efficient, way to go about it. And if they're like, you know what, it makes more sense this way, but they may have a horrible CFO who doesn't get in terms of IT, right? And so in terms of IT and technology and cybersecurity, some people are, get it better than others. And I think that you're fortunate to be in a position where yours gets it, and you've got a partner versus an opponent when it comes to that. And so I think that's really important. Obviously everybody's in the organization trying to do their best for the organization, but there are ways of organizing the organization that aren't as efficient and beneficial to that end goal. And I think in your case, they've done a really good job of aligning that, and I'm kind of curious, was that did you say it's Harold, your old mentor friend? Did he set that up, or was that in place beforehand? I'm kind of curious.
So a very interesting situation. But before I answer that, I kind of want to piggyback on what you said in that, like, and this is why I think it's good because you said it's better to have a partner than an opponent. And I think these are like the conversations that aren't had when it comes to leadership in IT because you need those skills. Like, what do you do if you got somebody who's just full of ego and prideful, and honestly, the guy's just an asshole? Like, that's part of your job to figure that out. Like, how do you make the asshole your friend? Like,
That's right.
and people may not want to hear it. And they might be like, well, it's not my job to do that. It is. It trust me, it'll make your life easier. And if you
That's
don't
right.
got those skills, that's your shortcoming. If you
Yep.
really want to be in leadership and you want to get better, you got to learn to deal with every single personality. If you want this, you want everything that come with it. So I just wanted to piggyback off
I
that.
love
Uh,
I love that. That is 100% true. Totally agree.
so it's, but it worked out very funny. So I'm gonna sum up a long story very, very quick. Uh, so I met Harold because I worked at a law firm. Law firm was absolutely amazing. Great job, great position to grow. Honestly, I thought I was gonna stay there for 10 years. Then Harold left and he called me and asked me to work with him again. And very tough decision for me, but I decided to choose the good boss opposed to the good company,
Yeah.
which that's a whole conversation in and of itself.
Yeah, it is.
And funny enough, my CFO and Harold used to work together too at the same law firm. So
Oh,
like, so three people from the law firm went to this new company, and it wasn't poaching or anything. Like, honest to
yeah.
God, it was a very natural thing. But outside looking in, I could understand how you think it looks like
Sure.
sketchy or fishy, but it just wasn't. And it was relationships. And then we can have a conversation about networking and why it's good to network because that puts you in better situations. So I
Yeah.
got put in a situation where the CFO and Harold, great business relationship, friends outside of work. So Harold introduced me to the CFO. We got a relationship. So like I said, still friends with Harold, building a relationship with the CFO. So like all three of us like knew each other, had history, and like we built a really good team.
Yeah.
And we all knew each other. We all knew how it worked. I love Harold. Harold is a very unique leader though. Harold is more so a typical IT guy, and he would just come in and tell me like one sentence, and I just have to know what to do from that one sentence, opposed to like, but I can work like that, so that's
Yeah.
why we matched. But long story short, yeah, that's like Harold was the middle guy, so he did kind of set me up for success even with him leaving. But that's the benefit of having a good network.
That's right. No, it really is. And I think we could do, and maybe we will do an entire episode just on that kind of networking. I think it's so important. And yes, it's part of the soft skills, but there are so many aspects to that. And we've touched on it, and had those on the podcast. We've had a number of guests who that's their thing. It's all kind of about networking, and I don't care what industry you're in, whether it's IT, whether it's architect, whether it does not matter. That network, it ends up being so very valuable, and it's one of those skills that it requires you to really look into it and figure out how you do it, because I don't think for anybody it comes naturally. There's only so many people in the world that you can keep up a relationship with, that you can keep those interactions with. And if you're trying to build a decent network, you've got to have a system in place to where you can manage it and then, be a benefit. And the real kind of essence of a network is making those connections and being of value and service to the people in your network. It's not about what can I get. Doesn't matter. What really matters is I know David and I know Harold, and you know what? They're awesome. And David's looking for a job, and they would work great together. Let me introduce these two, and they're great. Yeah. And it doesn't matter if it's individuals, companies, that just being that connector is so incredibly valuable, and it's something that people don't talk about. It's not really out there. It's a skill you got to build up. And so, yeah, I think we could go on and on. We could do a whole episode for sure about networking. And I think this has been really fun. I really love the fact that we're kind of starting these conversations for IT managers, people coming up, the C-suite. I think everybody gets to come together here and hear what you have to say and kind of the benefits. So this has been fantastic. I've loved this conversation. I'm very thankful that you were our first guest on the IT Manager series. I think this was wonderful. But before we go, can you tell everybody, first of all, any last thoughts that you wanted to share? But can you tell everybody where they can find out more about you and more about OTJ?
Oh yeah. So last thing I will share, and just to backtrack slightly, is this is why it's really good, like with your staff, to have that 2-year plan as well, because you talk about what value I can give. People will remember how you made them feel more so than what they will remember what you did for them. So with the team that I'm training up and they go on to do better things, I'm expanding my network. So if one of these guys becomes the next Steve Jobs, he'll remember me. Like David was the guy that instilled in me to go out and do it. And like, so you can even build your network and how you develop people around you. So, but I don't want to start a whole different conversation. But that's another benefit to letting people go. You're like, be a mama bird. They gotta fly at some point. You don't want to just hold people hostage.
That's right.
I'm pretty much on just LinkedIn. I'm not a big like social media guy, but you can definitely find me on LinkedIn. OTJ.com for OTJ Architects. Like I said, if you are a new business owner, existing business owner, you want to redo your space, come hit us up. We do fantastic work. Check out our site.
They really do. David, been a huge pleasure. Thanks so much for coming on, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for having me. This has been amazing.
Thanks for listening to the Cyber Business Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.